So, an official hello to those who haven't said hello to yet. I hope you're all well, and thank you very much for joining us for this special webinar as we continue to mark a special milestone for the Society for the Environment and the Chartered Environmentalist registration. We actually gained our Royal Charter 21 years ago this month, way back in 2004, and the first Chartered Environmentalists, or CEnvs, followed later that year in September. So that's when we first registered our very first Chartered Environmentalists. We're very proud of our progress and what we collectively stand for, which is, as always, it centers around giving proven, competent professionals who protect and enhance the environment the tools and the recognition to make an even bigger difference. So our overall vision is a sustainable future. So whilst we have a good print of pride of what we've done so far, we are also very realistic. We haven't achieved our vision yet, it's fair to say. We believe that registered environmental professionals will lead the way, though, locally, globally, and across professions and collectively. And today we're here to talk to three of them about the Chartered Environmentalist registration in particular and about their careers so far. I hope by the end of this session, we can, the current Chartered Environmentalists feel proud and energized, and future Chartered Environmentalists have a good pinch of inspiration and hopefully raring to go. That's the aim. So before we go any further, my name is Phil Underwood. I'm the Engagement Manager here at the Society for the Environment. If you have any questions following this webinar, or if you want to email me during the webinar, it's up to you. Feel very free to contact me via the email address that's on your screen, or if you wanted to, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Very much up to you. Okay, a little bit of an introduction to Society for the Environment, just in case you weren't aware. Since starting nearly 21 years ago now, with 65 initial Chartered Environmentalists on the very first day, there are now over 8,000 Chartered Environmentalists around the world. Each CEnv has registered through their membership of one of these professional bodies. There it is, one of these professional bodies. To achieve the environmental chartership, you'll need to be a member of and apply via one of these professional bodies, which our three guests have done so. Hopefully you'll recognize one or two of them already. If you do recognize them, and if you have an idea of if you're aspiring to be a chartered environmentalist in the future, if one of these is your pathways, if you want to put it in the chat just to let us know, that would be really interesting to find out. If you wanted to find out more about the pathways and so on, please visit socenv.org.uk. That's SocEnv.org.uk, or inquire with the relevant professional body directly. It's up to you. And I'm very much happy to make introductions if you wanted to contact me first. It's entirely up to you. Okay, so let's remove these slides. That's a very, very brief introduction. And we've got a couple of people saying hi in the chat, so thank you very much for that. If you want to introduce yourself, feel free to. Okay, so that's enough from me. As mentioned, we have three Chartered Environmentalists with us today to talk about how CEnv has helped them personally and within their careers. Each speaker has had a different career path to date. One of our guests successfully applied for CEnv registration in 2004, becoming one of the first 400 CEnvs in that year, in that first year. And two other guests who have registered relatively recently in 2023 and 2024, respectively. The different perspectives and career paths and areas of expertise makes the CEnv community extremely valuable, I think. So let's talk to them, shall we? Firstly, each of our guests will have a few minutes to introduce who they are, why they do what they do, and how CEnv fits in to their careers and their personal life and so on, and their career goals, I guess. First up to provide insights is Dr. Stephanie Wray, who is an ecologist and sustainability consultant whose 30-year career spans consultancy, applied research and teaching. She's registered as a Chartered Environmentalist via the Chartered Institute of Ecology and Environmental Management, or CEnv for short, and has been a CEnv for just over 20 years now. So welcome, Stephanie. Thank you for joining us today. If it's okay, I'm going to leave the rest of the introduction to you and to give us a bit of an insight into what you do, why you do it, and where CM fits in.
Thanks, Phil. Well, hi, I'm Steph Wray, and as Phil's already told you, I'm an ecologist by training. It's quite a misunderstood term, I think, for anyone who's from a different part of the SocEnv universe and isn't necessarily clear. Ecologists are the people who triangulate the vectors of interconnectedness of all things. We try to understand the complexity of the natural environment as a system. We try to understand, if we change one thing over here, what will happen over there, and to look at that sort of real web of intricacies. So it's not necessarily, can be for some people, it's not necessarily about, a love of badgers or anything like that, or bugs and bunnies, as we're often accused of. But it is very much around that whole systems thinking and around the natural world. It's a very numerate scientific discipline. So that's where my background is. I came from academia. I did a PhD and a postdoc in ecology, and then when I got back to the UK after doing a postdoc overseas for a year, literally it was a jungle out there. I decided to look around for something to do. I didn't want to stay in academia, and environmental consultancy, particularly ecological consultancy, was really quite new in those days. And there weren't many rules, there weren't many guidelines or best practice advice. And so it was the Wild West. We were out there trying to work out how to do this and how to make it better. And when I first started, my first project I worked on was what's now the M6 toll road, was in those days called the Birmingham Northern Relief Road. And my first job was to review the environmental statement. At this point, I'm reviewing it, almost in a spell checkery kind of way. But I was reading it and learning a lot about it and realizing that ecology was so primitive compared to other environmental disciplines. And really that's been the focus of my career path, I think, has been trying to make sure that ecology moved out of just the sciences and into that real practical application on projects for people in communities, in businesses, out in the real world. How do we apply this thinking and really try to work with nature, to work with the grain of nature rather than against it all the time? So throughout my career, I've worked as a consultant in that kind of EIA planning type consultancy. I've worked in consultancy specifically for organizations, looking at the relationship of a whole organization with nature rather than just a specific project. So, what does our whole value chain look like? Where do we interact with nature? Where do we depend on nature? Where do we have impacts on it? And what do those impacts and dependencies mean in terms of risks and opportunities for your business? And I've broadened out my approach into not just looking at nature on its own, but looking at the wider aspects of nature and climate and people, and that sort of whole trilogy of things that make up sustainability, effectively, the ESG approaches of most organizations. And so latterly, I'm doing very little sort of active ecology work, going out wearing wellies, and much more waving my arms around in boardrooms, which is probably my natural environment, in fairness. And I think that career transition has been down to, two aspects, really. I think one is that I'm quite passionate about helping clients. I'm there to solve problems. And so working with business, for business, I wanted to learn more about business, and I ended up along my career path doing an MBA. So I'm probably that very rare part of the Venn diagram where someone who's got a PhD in ecology and an MBA and a weird interest in mergers and acquisitions. There's not many of us about. It's a bit of a niche. Don't know if I'll ever find any work. But also through the Chartered Institutes, both CEnv, although we didn't receive the Royal Charter until I think it was 2014 possibly, and and through SocEnv. So when the opportunity to become chartered came up through SocEnv, I was really keen to take that up because I think it gives us parity with other professions. People understand that. People understand a chartered professional. It means a certain thing, and it's important, I think, in setting standards, both in terms of how we are perceived from outside the professions that we're all in, and also within the profession. It gives us a career structure and something to work with towards. And I thought that was really valuable. And whilst I am definitely an ecologist through and through, and I go to my Ecologists Anonymous meetings, or SCI meetings as you prefer, I do get a lot of value from this overarching group within SocEnv, because I think it's when we're dealing with these really knotty problems of nature loss and climate change and increasing social inequalities, we need diversity of thought and diversity of backgrounds and knowledge, and that sort of cross-fertilization across the different professions that we have through SocEnv is something that I really value and I think is important to a lot of people's career paths. Is that enough, Phil?
For now, yeah, definitely. Sounds like you've got some goals still as well. So, it's that was really good instruction. Thank you very much for that. And a lot covered already. And I didn't realise that the M6 toll was your first project. That was an interesting one. Not too far away from me. So
18 months public inquiry.
Really? Okay.
Talk about baptism of fire.
Well, I spent about 20 minutes stuck at the toll because I didn't have any money on me, and I didn't really realise I was going down the M6 toll. That was a few years ago. I won't make that mistake again. That's where contactless on your phone becomes very useful, which wasn't a thing back then. But never mind. And really interesting points already there, particularly about boardrooms and so on. I'm going to fire a quick question at you before I go over to Edward, if that's okay. You mentioned you like waving your hands around in boardrooms and so on. Has that become more of a thing that you're able to do now because the environmental profession has moved to a place that allows more environmental discussion in boardrooms since 20 years ago? I'm aware that your career has also progressed since that point as well, but is it more of a thing?
I think it really is. I think that more and more organizations recognize that this isn't just about ticking boxes, but that these things actually have a material impact on the performance of their business and are strategically important. So yeah, I do think we see much more discussion around climate and nature and people in boardrooms than we did 20 years ago. It would be almost unheard of 20 years ago. And yet here we are today, and a high street bank, Lloyds Bank, has a head of ecology. Who would have thought even 5 years ago that a high street bank would have a head of ecology?
Very true. Very true. And up until a few years ago, I didn't realise that we had a chartered environmentalist who is a CEO of a bank, which is interesting.
Excellent.
It's good to know. So yes, so this is just a quick reminder that if after we've heard from Edward and Will as well, please ask your questions in the Q&A and we'll get to them afterwards. Very much an open Q&A session afterwards, so please have those questions ready for us. So thank you, Stephanie, for kicking things off. Next up is Edward Debrah. Edward is a Chartered Waste and Resource Manager and a Chartered Environmentalist, and an accomplished HSEQ professional. So if somebody doesn't know what that is, Edward, if you could enlighten us, that would be fantastic. With 13 years experience across diverse industries. Edward is registered as a Chartered Environmentalist via IEMA, or the Institute of Environmental Management and Assessment, and has been since 2023. Sorry. Otherwise, you would have jumped the gun slightly with CEnv. So I'll leave the rest of the introduction to Edward and hand straight over to you, if that's okay.
That's fine. Thank you so much for the opportunity, Phil. When you mentioned 2003, I was just thinking to myself, bloody hell, I was in secondary school at the time. Yes, that's just by the way. So
don't tell Stephanie
that. We heard, Edward.
My name is Edward Debrah, and I'm a Ghanaian national, currently based in the UK. My career really started from oil and gas. So I was appointed Health, Safety, Environment Quality Officer, I think in 2013. This was after my first master's degree from Coventry University, where I studied oil and gas management. So I had a responsibility of looking after everything environment within the oil and gas sector, from fuel stations to building of terminals, running of those stations, transporting of fuels from one location to the other, and all of that. The role involved a lot of environmental nuances, and that led me to getting to know more about the environment. So dealing with the regulator in Ghana at the time, I saw so many things that I thought could be done right. They are doing so well, but I thought there was a lot of things that needs improving. So I spent about 6 years in oil and gas. I moved to construction, did a bit of high-profile projects in Ghana, hospitals and things like that. Looked after health and safety as well. Then I got the opportunity to come for further studies. So then I had the opportunity of studying for law in sustainable development. At the time, then I realized that, okay, so if we are not careful to look after our environment properly, in the next few years, we'll have nowhere to live. And I also noticed that these days, when you expect rains to fall, it doesn't. But when you are not expecting rains to fall, that's when it starts falling. So there was something wrong with the climate there. What are we doing differently? Is it human activity that is impacting the environment? Yes. So after that studies, then I noticed that I need to move higher. If I'm able to influence policy, if I'm able to change the direction of how things should be properly, I need to have that mark of approval. So I got interested in becoming a chartered environmentalist. And since then, it's not been the same. I support a lot of policy initiatives back home in my country. I do a lot of education pieces for people, trying to let people understand that indeed the environment is all we've got. So if we can't protect it, we shouldn't destroy it. There's an adage in my country, and we always say that the last tree dies, the last man dies. So this day and age, there's this craze that's going on down in Africa in some parts, Ghana in some parts of Africa, where people are heavily involved in illegal mining. Illegal mining is when they use heavy metals, mercury, cyanide, and things like that. Sometimes even mining in river bodies. These river bodies produce food for everybody. Some of these food stuff are even exported. So you can imagine that you probably might be eating mango from Ghana that is maybe affected by mercury. So nobody is safe. What can I do differently? I want to be a voice to bring that change. So this mark of approval as a CEnv has actually given me the room to be able to speak to leaders to sort of change the narratives. I put together a lot of article pieces and things, get on webinars, sometimes involved with a lot of conversations on X about illegal mining activities, its impact on people and all of that. And I feel that it has really helped me to be accepted, because everybody knows that whatever knowledge I'll be sharing from the environmental perspective is coming from a place of expertise. My membership with IMA has actually given me the leverage. And again, SocEnv has also given me a lot of opportunities to learn more, read more from senior leaders in the industry. So I get both worlds. I get advantage of both worlds to really make an impact in where I find myself. So essentially, this is how well the professional body has supported my growth career. And I'm aiming at doing more to even encourage younger ones, because I've got a mentorship scheme where I use that to influence younger people to also get to know why we've got to protect the environment at all costs. Because without the environment, without the planet, without the people, nothing gets done. So once we come together, we can form that synergy to bring change.
Fantastic. Well, there's some really key points there, isn't there? And thank you very much for sharing those with us. And nice to be on a call with a fellow Coventry University student of alumni. So that's always good. Quick question for Edward would be, chartership is a fairly well-known thing. Stephanie mentioned as well, chartership is kind of known as a concept, not necessarily always chartered environmentalists, but chartership in general is known as a thing. How well is that known in Ghana, where you're trying to be as influential as possible? You've mentioned that CEnv has helped you with that. is the Chartered Environmentalist registration or chartership in general a known concept?
Yes, it is. It is a known concept. I've actually been involved with a lot of professional bodies in the past, so we get to hear more about these things. And again, in Ghana, we do not have a lot of chartered environmentalists, but there's a wind blowing. These days, you find a lot more people in my DMs trying to get involved, trying to find out what to do to go to the process and all of that. So people are accepting that the chartership is the highest level of sort of recognition that's confirms that whoever is chartered is going through the process of learning, making sure they're keeping their skills in date and all of that. So yes, it gives you that trust. People trust you when you have that. So whatever you say, suggestions that you give carries a lot of weight, so it's really accepted. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much for leading the way on that and championing the Chartered Environmentalist registration alongside environmental competence and professionalism as a whole. So if we can support you in any way with that, we certainly will try. So thank you very much, Edward. Moving on to our final speaker of today, which is Will Ennett, who has been very recently recognised in the top 100 most impactful environment professionals in the UK by the Ends Power List 2025. Will has 20 years career experience in telecoms, media and technology, and is also registered as a Chartered Environmentalist via IEMA. Will is a relative newbie to the CEnv registration, having registered at the very start of last year, I believe. So I guess you probably submitted to your application the year previous, probably. But so we're going to hand over to Will for the next few minutes. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Phil, for having me. So yeah, my name is Will Ennett, and my background is not really in sustainability. So hopefully I can give a little bit of a taster of having that career pivot, which I know so many people are interested in, and particularly as we look at this green transition and net zero transition, I think that's going to be so important about how we bring people with a real diverse set of skill sets into working on environmental matters. So probably like a lot of people, I pivoted, partially because there was something, it was a topic area that was always of significant interest, but probably early on in my career, less outlets, as Stephanie said, they're now recently becoming a ecology lead in a bank. If you go back, I would say even 10 years ago, across telecoms and media, there was not many people working in sustainable environmental or fields. So, a number of circumstances came together very well. And as I said, sometimes I think life changes do propel you on. So in my case, growing family, moving, and all these things, I think they create chaos, and you sort of reevaluate what you want to do. And so I've been lucky enough to then lead sustainability and ESG for a corporation for the last 5 years. What I would say in terms of why I was so attracted to becoming a member of IEMA and also a chartered environmentalist was that I do think if you're working in particularly kind of large private sector companies, your goal is to make sustainability intrinsic to decision making, part of the fabric of the business. And if we're honest, by and large, that isn't the case today, right? It's still very much centered around maybe short-term profit maximization. So I actually think it's a blend of skills that's necessary. You need those technical skills to be able to talk confidently and fluently in the language of, climate, greenhouse gas emissions, other environmental and social factors as well. But you also need to, I think, understand the industry, the way it operates, the way it makes money, etc. So a blend of those skills is really ideal. And so that for me is me acknowledging that I had lots of experience in the sector. I'd been at the company actually a long time, but I was more green, so to speak, pardon the pun, on this particular topic. So I found, the great thing about becoming part of a professional body was having to demonstrate technical skills, having a roadmap to becoming a member and making sure that actually you ticked off various elements, some of which were highly relevant to what I was trying to achieve at the company, some may be less relevant, but actually they've also stood me in good stead, because over time, understanding those variety of technical skills has helped. And also, I think the continuous learning. So, that CPD, that discipline, more of a gentle nudge than a hard, stick of continuously learning means that, you are going out there, picking things up and developing your skills. So, yeah, and I would just echo what Edward said as well in terms of the it definitely helped with the recognition. So it helps give you a little bit more visibility externally, and it also gives you more ability to talk confidently. And actually, just even that intrinsic confidence is really important and often overlooked as well. It's not just the skills for the sake of it. It's just that self-belief that actually you do belong and you can speak confidently and fluently on this topic as well. So, those would be the main things. And actually, one area that particularly on SocEnv I've really enjoyed is when there's the annual meetings, like last year in London, and obviously coming up next week in Liverpool. I'll plug that for you now, Phil. Is that ability to meet with ecologists, waste professionals, people across other disciplines. And that's probably an area that I would like to lean into a bit more. You probably see those LinkedIn memes of people with sort of carbon tunnel vision. And that probably is a good description of me. I'm sort of very hyper-focused on particularly like scope 3 greenhouse gas emissions, but actually learning from and hearing from others is I could see it having both longevity in terms of career, but also in terms of actually bringing some important learnings back into the working world.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for sharing. And I think that shows that we've got 3 different perspectives there, really, from different sectors doing different things and different career journeys, it's fair to say. It's great to hear that the CEnv registration has helped with the recognition and the personal confidence to help you make more of a difference. By the sounds of it, it's probably what one of your goals was. You mentioned having a roadmap of, I guess that was to do with the competencies, was it? A roadmap to try and kind of check off the competencies towards your CEnv registration, is that right?
Yeah, that's right, exactly. So to meet the in this case the kind of full member Institute of Environmental Management and Assessment, there's a roadmap. So it's making sure we demonstrate that. And again, what I like about the skills based is you've got those technical skills and demonstrating that you understand the technicalities, the policy landscape, but also those, let's call it softer skills, communications, analytical thinking, and there'll be variations of it, but largely I'm sure the same theme across the professional bodies. And actually, again, if we say, well, the goal is to try and make environmental decision making more intrinsic into, let's say, corporations or businesses, then you need the mix of both. And so I think there's a good reflection in a lot of the professional bodies on that.
That makes sense. One of the main reasons I ask, I knew that IEMA had a roadmap of some form. It's something we're looking to develop to make sure that those who are going through any pathway to become a chartered environmentalist has that kind of toolkit available to them to be able to find where they're sitting in the on their journey to become a chartered environmentalist, because sometimes it's not that clear. And obviously you have the competencies that can sit in front of you for a year of you contemplating, but without kind of checking those off as you go, it can be quite daunting, can't it? I guess something we're looking into at the moment. So we do have a question in, so I'm going to jump to that. But thank you very much, Will, for that again, and thank you to Edward and Stephanie for your introductions. So if we do have questions, feel free to pop them in. You can put them in the chat, you can put them in the Q&A section. It's entirely up to you. We've got one from Jennifer. Do you feel the CEnv accreditation is recognized internationally? Now, I know, Edward, you mentioned that it certainly helped you in your work in Ghana. So I get the feeling the answer to that would be yes, but did you want to add any more to that?
Yes, it's an absolute and resounding yes. You find a lot of people these days getting interested, trying to, as I mentioned earlier, on a daily basis, I receive about 2 or 3 inquiries about how people can be chartered members, chartered environmentalists, and things like that. So really, the wind is blowing. Currently in Ghana, I can speak to maybe about 15 people, or maybe more. I'm not too sure of the number. But in Nigeria, I've seen quite a number of people as well getting in there. You see that most of them are practitioner members now, but they are aspiring. Even here in the UK, a few people have reached out, a few people from African origin have reached out to me to tell me that I should guide them through the process of being chartered environmentalist. So that should tell you that indeed a lot more people are getting involved. And yes, it is recognized, especially in the part of the world that I'm from. Not just there, even in Europe and all other places, America and things like that. Yes, there are a few people I have as friends in America. Whenever I speak to them, they ask me how they can be chartered environmentalists, and I guide them in the process as well. So yes, internationally, it is recognized.
Okay, interesting. At this point, any of our guests today, if you wanted to chip in or add any comments, it's entirely up to you. We'd very much welcome with that. We're happy to have a free-flowing conversation, really. I'm going to go to Steph, actually, because you mentioned you did an overseas postdoc. Is that right?
Yeah.
Where was that?
Well, it was in the Comoro Islands.
Comoro Islands?
Yeah, not many people have heard of them. I've only once in my life met someone who went, "Oh, wow, the Comoro Islands, I've been there," and I nearly fell off my chair. But they're a little group of islands in the Western Indian Ocean between the east coast of Africa and Madagascar.
Oh, okay, interesting.
And I spent a year there studying a very large fruit bat.
Very large fruit bat. Okay, interesting.
But since then, during my sort of consultancy career, I've had roles that have encompassed consultancy teams in Western Europe, in Africa, in the Middle East, in Southeast Asia, and in Australia. So yeah, it is by its nature a really international kind of a business, environmental consultancy. And so, yes, I think even in countries where perhaps CEnv or CEcol, in my case, were not recognized directly, the concept of chartership always is and is always valued.
Okay, interesting. So what my question was going to be, do you think it's recognized enough?
Do I think it's recognized enough? CEnv specifically?
Yeah.
I'm
happy to be challenging.
Yeah, I think it could do more. I think we as chartered environmentalists and the society itself could do more to work on that international recognition and bring, I said what I value about it is that sort of diversity of thought and experience that comes to bear on these environmental issues. And I think you can only improve that by getting perspectives from different parts of the world as well. And I think trying to link up with institutions in other countries would be a great thing to do and become more international.
It's something we're really, really keen on, the international perspective across environmental professionalism. Obviously, the environment doesn't stop at borders. It never has done. There are environmental professionals working across many different countries. I can't remember the number now. I know that there are 15% of our registrants are based outside the UK. So that's 15, 1-5, not 50. Which we're looking to expand upon that. But Will, you came off mute. Did you want to?
Yeah, I actually wanted to comment to some extent about international, but probably more generally on the chartered status, which is that obviously in different industries it is different in terms of some of the chartered status are a lot more exam based. But one thing that I think is for me noticeable is that actually this level of qualification is, let's say, kind of level 7 sort of master's equivalent. But if you were to do, let's say, if you were to review 100 job adverts in this environmental space, often the sort of skill set will be like a master's level qualification, like a sort of a university led thing. Actually, I think that's probably another area. Whereas, could there be more recognition that actually, could that seep into more of the consciousness that this is also a valid pathway to that higher level of understanding?
Yep. Yep. Very true. And it's worth mentioning that there's so many different pathways to become a chartered environmentalist as well. You mentioned the master's level knowledge. That is the underpinning of becoming a chartered environmentalist, but it doesn't mean you have to have a master's degree by a long stretch. So it's master's level knowledge, but there are so many different routes. And the apprenticeship world, for example, is fantastic for a pathway to become chartered environmentalist at some point. Edward.
Yeah, so going back to the recognition outside internationally, these days you find a lot of banks getting into sustainable financing. And banks have created roles for people who are environmentalists. They call them environmental safeguard specialists, who are supposed to review businesses that come approach the bank for funding for their businesses. I mean, so mining accounts from banks, most times the people that lead those portfolios in the banks should have some level of environmental background. So you would notice that a lot more people, quite apart from the traditional natural resource business-based people, oil and gas, mining, construction, getting involved with environmental stuff, these days you find the banking people equally getting involved as well. So quite recently, there's an association in Ghana, they call them Institute of Sustainability Professionals of Ghana. I didn't know about them, but they reached out to me and they asked that they want me to be part of them so that we can drive the sustainability change in Ghana as far as environmental awareness and things are concerned. And so I had an engagement with them, and I noticed that almost all the members in that association were banking professionals and lawyers. So that should tell you that the change, the paradigm is actually shifting. So you're finding a lot more people from diverse backgrounds getting involved. It's no more the traditional people who used to do it. I know that currently the Environmental Protection Authority in Ghana is actually spearheading efforts towards making sure that environmental education becomes very basic for everybody to be aware of. So we are able to do the basic things just to protect the environment for future generations. So indeed, the recognition keeps soaring and soaring and soaring. I also saw a question about how do you convince your employer to probably buy into this. I can use my employer as an example. They pay my professional membership fees. I didn't have to do any convincing. They know the value of it, so they pay it. Again, I am speaking on my personal capacity, not on behalf of them. Everything I'm saying here are strictly my views, but then they pay for my professional membership fees. And for me, that makes it easier because that's an employer who is interested in what you're doing and wanting you to continue on that path, because they know that once you keep your membership, you are definitely going to your CPD. So your skills are relevant. And when you need resources, assuming the business is going through any challenges that requires environmental support, they know they could rely on you to get in touch with your professional body to support. So a lot of businesses really are making a lot of gain from having people who are recognized as employees as against having those who are not recognized. Even if you want to consider bidding for projects, contracts, and things like that, once you put the people who are on your team, you profile them and you send them across to the potential companies you want to bid. When they see that you have senior people within that scope who have those expertise in that area, people will be compelled to consider you, probably give more business. So it provides competitive edge as well.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
what I wanted to add.
No, fantastic. It's great to hear that the company you work for currently are supportive of your application to become a chartered environmentalist and so on. So that was a relatively easy sell, if there was any selling at all. Steph and Will, have you had any different experiences in terms of needing to sell the opportunity to become a chartered environmentalist to your organisation in any way?
From my perspective, no. I've always had an employer who was supportive of professional development and has also always funded. I think most of the people I've worked for, certainly larger employers, have always funded up to 2 professional registrations per employee.
Okay.
I think the way to sell it depends what your role is, Jennifer, within the organisation. But I think the way to sell that to an employer who isn't aware of it is to just focus on the practical benefits. This is the learning it will give me, the training opportunities it will give me. This is the opportunities it will give me for networking with other people who are doing the same job as me. That's going to help me do my job better. It's going to, potentially, depending on what role you're in, it's potentially going to, keep this business out of court by us not making mistakes over our health and safety or our environmental issues and so forth. So I think it's selling it on the benefits to how well you will do your role and the impacts that your role will have on that company as a whole.
Okay. Well,
just have one perspective, and it was no problem whatsoever with the employer. But what in my case, I sort of file annual tax returns, and even if you are full-time employed, your registration to a professional body in the UK is tax deductible. And so that is just, I guess, I know it's probably, but that's like if you happen not to get the support from the employer, that think about that. And by the way, I'm not a tax or I do not offer any financial advice.
Financial advice.
maybe I have HMRC knocking on my door, but I've been doing that for a number of years. And again, if you can read up on that. So yes, I guess you've got to pay for it, but you will effectively sort of get it back. There's a drop down list of all the different professional bodies that are sort of accredited where the government. So if you're unable to get support, that is another way around it.
Fantastic. Good to know. Sticking with employers, Stephanie, you've worked for a couple of consultancies, at least possibly. Yeah. And consultancies are the biggest employers of chartered environmentalists, generally, overall. Why is environmental chartership so important to a consultancy, for example? And is it generally company driven? You mentioned you got a lot of support generally for CEnv registration.
Yes, I think it is quite strongly company driven, and in a lot of, certainly in the larger consultancies with more complex or well developed sort of staff scales and salary scales and so on, it can be linked to promotion. It maybe you can't get beyond the grade of senior ecologist unless you're chartered and so forth. And I think the reason for that is because a lot of these environmental consultancies are big, multidisciplinary multinationals with a lot of chartered engineers and so forth. And it's sort of, that's a mechanism they understand. They understand what a chartered engineer is. And so it's kind of, it gets that onto a parity. It helps them, it helps the employer to understand career professional. And it also gives that line in the sand. When you're chartered, then, I always think that people call themselves a consultant too early. You're a consultant when you have a body of knowledge and expertise that somebody might want to consult you about. And I think chartership is that line in the sand. That's the point where you can deliver real value to a client.
Okay, interesting. This is where I just wanted to bring different perspectives in, I guess, because, well, at the other end of the scale, to a degree, there aren't that many chartered environmentalists working in telecommunications, for example, despite it being, it's fair to say, quite a large sector. Why do you think that might be, and should that trend change?
Well, I think obviously if you take a company, so in my case, I was working for a company for around about 2,000 staff, and there was one chartered environmentalist, right? So I mean that you're going to have those ratios, right? In larger companies or even smaller companies where there is only going to be a very, very small percentage, less than 1% of the workforce dedicated to even if you broaden that out to include health and safety, environment, sustainability, all those topics. So I think that's probably the largest case, and whereas consultancies are obviously wholly focused, or those focusing on these topics are wholly focused on the topics. Yeah. I think as well that there's probably a little bit like what we were saying earlier, is that there are a number of routes to becoming, particularly in, let's say, corporate sustainability, an expert, and chartered environmentalists or professional bodies is one of those. And for me, I found that the kind of continuous learning and the continued support and the professional accreditation was really valuable. But others may pick let's say the master's route, or more, very vocational type qualifications. So, let's say, qualified auditors or certifiers on ISO standards, or whatever it might be. So, yeah, I think it's largely just down to the numbers, but then also secondly, there's just a variety of different ways in to sort of make yourself an expert. But hopefully we just see more and more people come in, because, again, if we take telecoms, what I would always wanted to achieve and would love to achieve more is how many people that work in product design or R&D or innovation. And that's really, if you think about, there was a great stat, like a Pareto principle type stat, 80% of the embodied emissions of a product are created in the design stage. Now, how true that is. But, if we could have more of those actually going through and becoming professionally accredited, wouldn't that be so impactful to think about the future of the industry? Because they're the ones kind of creating the products and services, and particularly in telecoms, and I'm sure Edward's experience in construction and other areas, they're there for a very long time, 30 to 50 year period. So if we can capture those people, so that would be my probably what I'd love to see if I had a magic wand.
We all want a magic wand, a very sustainable magic wand that's been designed from the start to be incredibly environmentally conscious. So we've got, I think, I've got 3 more questions that have been coming from the audience today. So I'm going to skip through those before we get to an hour. We're going to try and finish at about 1 o'clock. So one question being, once we get Chartered Environmentalist, what's the ongoing support and development options available? Does anybody want to chip in any experience that you've had around what happens once you become a Chartered Environmentalist, ongoing support, that kind of thing?
I think that, oh, sorry, Steph, go ahead.
No, carry on.
Okay, go ahead, ladies first, go ahead.
Well, I was simply going to say that a lot of that will depend on the route through which you get to Chartered Environmentalist accreditation.
Yeah.
But that it will primarily probably be driven by your own professional institution and the CPD opportunities there and the CPD requirements of that institution. Speaking from my perspective through CEnv, there's an enormous program of conferences, training courses, workshops, seminars, webinars, and so forth that people can take part in. And there is a requirement for compulsory CPD to make sure that people do continue to develop and update their skills and move with the times.
Yeah. Edward, do you want to come in?
No, she just said what I wanted to say.
Very simple. Okay, there you go. Took the words right out of your mouth. From a Society for the Environment point of view, I very much agree with Stephanie. A lot of the development opportunities will be through the professional body route that you go through. So CEnv, for example, or AIMA. Society for the Environment try to support as much as we can. It's fair to say we don't have quite the resources as other institutions might have to be able to do that. We try to connect people, we try to facilitate, we try to share knowledge, and so on. And that's a building thing that we're working on. Well, we have been working on for a number of years now, really. But we are open to ideas. We're open to provide support opportunities. But a lot of that will come through your professional body that you apply through. From feedback that we have, the main benefit that people see from becoming a Chartered Environmentalist specifically, as well as the networking and so on, and kind of broadening that influence, is the influence and is the recognition of having the CEnv letters after your name, for example. But we're trying to move beyond that at the moment. And as Stephanie says, a lot of that comes through the professional body that you're applying through. So hopefully that helps. But happy to answer any more questions that you might have. Now, next question is, how is a Chartered Environmentalist designation obtained from one professional body, for example, the RSC, which is the Royal Society of Chemistry, considered equivalent when applying for roles that require CEnv from another body, for example, AIMA? So, for instance, what's the name? Yogesh holds a Chartered Environmentalist registration with the Royal Society of Chemistry, but the job description specifies CEnv from AIMA. Are these qualifications considered equivalent for such roles? Now, I'm sure the organisation employing will have their take on that, and it's probably worth asking the question directly to them for a start. But from a Society for the Environment perspective, A chartered environmentalist has met a standard, put simply, and that standard is the same depending on, it doesn't matter which professional body you apply through. So you have to meet a certain standard, you have to meet all those competencies, and you have to be eligible. The difference is the contextualized nature of your application. So if you were to apply through the Royal Society of Chemistry, you are probably contextualizing your application to chemistry point of view. They can do a similar thing for IEMA, because IEMA is very broad in terms of the registrants that go through IEMA. But that would be our stance on that. But a chartered environmentalist has met a standard. So to specify you want a chartered environmentalist from IEMA, I don't know. But anybody else want to have an input on that one?
I mean, first of all, I would agree with what you've said, that I think it depends on the job role. So if it was say if it was the other way around and they'd specified a CEnv from the Royal Society of Chemistry, it may be that the role involved a lot of chemistry, and someone who is a CEnv from a general IEMA perspective might not have the skills
Correct.
that they really needed. If it isn't that sort of a role, if it appears to be a more general environmentalist role and they've asked for that, you never know. It may be a lack necessarily of understanding of what a CEnv is and what the breadth of that is on the part of the potential employer. And it might well be worth getting in touch with them and asking the question. And yeah. I know that this can be off-putting if you see a job description and it has a qualification or a requirement that you don't have. It's sometimes a little bit off-putting. And, I don't want to be sexist about this, but statistically, women are much less likely to apply for roles unless they tick all of the boxes. And I would say, do be a little bit brave about it, and do put yourself forward and sell the case for how you think you could do that job. And, there's no harm in giving it a go.
Absolutely. And I think you're quite right there, just making sure that they're aware of what a chartered environmentalist registrant is. We speak to a lot of organisations, and we have spoken to organisations in the past who have worked closely with specifically IEMA, and they see chartered environmentalist registration as an IEMA thing, and going through IEMA is a fantastic route. There's nothing against that, but there are different routes available, and not everybody is aware of that. So it is worth just exploring that, not taking anything away from IEMA at all. But okay. So we're going to move on to the final question. We've only got a couple of minutes, really. And it is to do with ecology. So as a botanical ecologist who is also interested in sustainability and ESG, would CEnv be a better option than pursuing CEcol? Now, whether there's a better or not, I don't know. I guess Stephanie would be
asking me which is my favourite child.
It's a challenging question. Maybe there isn't an answer there. Personal preference?
Is there? I don't think there honestly is one that's better than the other. I have both. I recommend having both. But or you could, do something completely different. Yeah. You could go and get a specialist MBA from the University of Cambridge Institute for Sustainable Leadership. You could do all sorts of things to progress your career in that direction. But I'd say choose the one that you think is most relevant to where you want to be. So if you're looking for a sort of a broader opening out of your career into sustainability, then maybe look at a wider CEnv and look at maybe IEMA, for example, alongside your CEnv membership. Or, if you want to do something really focused on nature and really bring that sort of that scientific rigor into the ESG space, carry on down the chartered ecologist route. So yeah, have a little think about the way you want to progress that. And by all means, drop me a note on LinkedIn if you want to talk about it.
Absolutely. Very diplomatic. And yes, it's an interesting question to answer. I guess there's an element of broadness to CEnv registration. Ecology maybe slightly, obviously it's ecology focused, but it's a personal preference. It depends what works for your career. So right, so that brings us to the end of our questions. So let me just work out my slides and so on. Here we go. Right, so for a start, huge thank you again to Edward, Stephanie and Will for joining us today. There is so much more we could talk about, and so many more questions I have written down that I would love to talk to you about at some point. But maybe that's for another episode. Who knows? So thank you for that. Before we leave you, I have 2 additional calls to action beyond obviously applying to become a Chartered Environmentalist if you wanted to do that. As mentioned, we are coming towards the end of our 20th year. We've produced some very nice content over the last 12 months, so please visit the webpage on your screen at the moment for some more inspiration. Got various blogs, various webinars, videos. We had another version of this a few months ago, and we've got another version of this coming up in a few months' time in September, which is the kind of 21st anniversary of becoming offering our first Chartered Environmentalist, for example. So please take a look at that. And then lastly, it was mentioned, very well plugged by Will, so thank you very much for that. A week today, on the 4th of June, is our annual SocEnv Awards and World Environment Day event. This is basically your chance to attend in Liverpool for free and be the first to find out who will be crowned the 2025 Environment Professional of the Year and Rising Star. We'll also have a World Environment Day expert panel discussing how international policy could end plastic pollution and how professionals can make a difference with that, how we can influence and so on. So to find out more and register very quickly via the link on the screen, very quickly, because it's next week and we need to put our final catering order in. So please do that. And the event will also be streamed. You can also watch it online. So that was my final slide. So thank you very much again for joining us and taking part. If you're watching on the recording on YouTube, please do subscribe. It helps. We're not YouTube influencers as such, but every like and subscribe does help. Now, I know they say it a lot, so we're going to say it as well. So please do like the video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell for notifications of any new content coming up as well. And we'll see you in the next webinar. Thank you very much for watching. That's it from me.